What if the reason you're struggling in love is not about information or that you haven't learned enough? What if it's not more relationship advice that you need, but what if it's healing that you need? You've read the books, you've listened to the podcasts, you understand a little bit about those attachment styles, about communication, about that feminine energy and boundaries, and even those red flags. But why is it that so many intelligent, self aware women still find themselves lonely, struggling in love, and just not feeling like they can get it right? Let me tell you, it's because it's a healing problem. It's not a knowledge or information problem. And after my recent conversation with Habeeb Akande, there's a missing piece of this conversation that we really need to dig into. Because understanding relationships and changing relationship patterns are two different things. And today we're going to talk about that missing piece. We're going to talk about healing. Stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of the Secret Formula of Femininity. I'm your host and guide on this journey to tapping into your feminine essence, Dr. Nicole. Again, welcome back to season 4. And if you listened to the 100th episode, my recent conversation with Habeeb Akande, you heard us discuss important topics like masculinity, like feminine energy, desire, the ingredients of healthy relationships, and some of the patterns that so many women seem to keep experiencing over and over that's blocking the kind of love that they say they want. And whenever I have conversations like that, I know that two things happen, at least two things. One is some women feel extremely validated. They are literally like, yes, she gets it. That part, they understand me. The other is that some women feel really challenged. It's like getting on those edges of their comfort zone and they don't really like it. They feel uncomfortable. And because relationship discussions, especially, make us confront our own patterns, we can all just feel like, okay, I hear the information, but where do we go from there? And they feel like they don't want to keep exploring that, even if they feel somewhat validated. So today I want to continue that conversation that we had that was so important. And I want to go down a slightly different road, take a slightly different perspective. Not so much as the relationship expert or the commentator on what's happening in the culture, which, as we've said, there's a lot of dysfunction happening in the culture around relationships that's affecting people. But I really want to talk more one to one about those specific patterns of healing or unhealing that have taken place and what you need to do to get back on track, despite or regardless of what's happening in the culture. Because I absolutely think that understanding the bigger picture is important, or that getting relationship advice. Look, I give relationship advice. So, of course, I think those things are so important. But I have also noticed something else that tends to happen. Many women don't necessarily need more advice. They can actually repeat the advice back to me better than the way I said it originally. They need healing. It's like that inner child, that wounded inner child that, as I described in a previous episode, tends to only rear her head when in a relationship, which is why relationships provide such an opportunity for further healing. But it's not cute, it's not always pretty, and it doesn't always feel so good. But the key thing is, a lot of times women don't know the difference between information and actually healing those wounds so you can then thrive in your relationship. And here's the thing, until we address that, no amount of dating tips, communication techniques, or feminine energy content is going to create the lasting change that most of the women that I encounter actually want. So let's talk about it. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. That applause is not just for me, it's actually for you, for even allowing yourself to get to the point of considering what's the pattern underneath. What do I actually need to change? So let's talk about that, because knowing what to do is not the same as doing it. And most of you all know I love my gym analogies. I love all kind of analogies that have to do with real life. So you can go to the gym, you can look at the equipment, you can read the instructions, you can read the books. I have so many fitness apps. I can look at the exercises, but until I do them, I'm not really going to benefit from any change. I'm not going to learn anything. I'm not going to see the little nuances of what I need to change and what I need to adjust until I get in there and start lifting the weights. My trainer can't come and say, fix your form, straighten your back, don't slump over, right? We can't do it unless we're doing it. So knowing what to do is absolutely not the same as doing it. And it leads to one of the biggest misconceptions in personal growth, which is the belief that awareness by itself creates transformation. And it's probably why so many people are complaining that we're in an age where people have access to so many concepts and terms and psychological jargon, so to speak. Some people will call it psychobabble, but people have access to information and terminology and concepts in a way that they never had before due to social media and more education around these topics. But you would think that would lead to healthier relationships, lower divorce rates, better communication, better parenting, but it's not actually doing that. It has led to a lot of awareness of our wounds, of our pain, of what we don't want, and maybe some idealization of what we think we want, but it hasn't necessarily created transformation. Because here's the thing, most women already know a few things. They know they need to communicate better. A lot of women know that their tongue can be too sharp. Some don't, because, I'll talk to them and they'll say, oh, okay. But a lot do. But what happens is when they get in that argument, because the wounded little girl comes out, they feel like they need to protect themselves and the tongue just starts cutting like a machete, right? So many women know that they should set boundaries and not be walked all over and be a doormat. They know that they shouldn't ignore the red flags. But here's the thing, so many of the red flags are the things that they grew up seeing or experiencing, so they feel familiar. So just knowing that it's a red flag doesn't make a person not choose a red flag. A lot of women, more and more, are knowing that they shouldn't be over functioning in relationships. And they're like, I need to just fall back. I need to just let him lead. I need to receive. Like all the talking points, right? Let me know if I'm right? Yes, that's a sign that, okay, I want you to think about it and let me know if this sounds on target. I think so many of us are starting to realize that the problem isn't information. The problem is implementation. How do we make it implement? And it's so funny. I just see this play out in so many areas, not just relationships, but it's not until I do a thing that I really understand how to do a thing. So it's not until I try to cook that complex dish that I've been eyeing and looking at the recipes and looking at the YouTubes and all the videos. Until I start cooking it, I don't really understand it. A pinch is this much versus that much. Or you want to put the salt in at the end versus the beginning. It's all of those little details. So it's the implementation. And the problem or the difficulty with implementation is that it becomes so hard, especially when our behaviors are tied to our unresolved wounds. And I always want to let you guys know, yes, I'm speaking from a clinical perspective, but these are things I had to go through personally. Because please show me the woman who doesn't have some childhood wounds. Show me the woman who hasn't been carrying around too much baggage or things that she needs to let go. Show me the woman who really had to learn to heal and not just think about it or talk about it. So I understand exactly how this plays out. One example that I see a lot is that a woman may know that she doesn't need to chase, that part of being in her feminine is to fall back and let him lead. But if she carries a deep fear of abandonment, which so many women do, with daddy wounds and even mommy wounds, she's still going to find herself over texting, trying to placate and please, over giving and over pursuing. It's like, okay, oh my God, he didn't say good morning. All right, what time should I expect it? Do I have to text back? Right? There's this pattern that is almost instinctual because she has a deep fear of abandonment. And it's not because she doesn't know better. She's heard the advice. She basically agrees with it. She's read the books. But because her nervous system is searching for safety in any place that it can think it will find it, that's why she keeps repeating that behavioral pattern. So this isn't a knowledge problem, it's actually an issue of healing. And that applause is for any woman who is ready to heal, who's ready to really dig her feet in and roll up her sleeves and do the work that is going to be so fulfilling at the end of the day. So shout out to you. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about in relation to the implementation thing is this idea of like, what is your actual personality? Because some of what we call personality is actually a set of behaviors that we have developed to help us protect ourselves. So, one thing I see, especially among the high achieving women, is this tendency to see these protection behaviors as just their personality. People will say, I'm just independent. That's just me. I'm just strong. I mean, hey, I can't change that. Or I just don't need anybody. I've always been like that, right? They will tell themselves that they just are control freaks. They're type A. This is just how they are. Now, sometimes there's parts of those things that, at a certain point, if it's so ingrained, it does become like your personality. But sometimes those behaviors really can be tied directly to things that had to be learned really early on about how to protect yourself, especially if you felt unsafe around the people, especially if you learned very early that the people you were supposed to depend on or who were supposed to help you were not going to be reliable. They weren't going to be consistent. They were going to disappoint you. Or maybe you just had to grow up too fast. You were parentified. You were taking care of others. You had that eldest girl syndrome that we talk about, right? You ever hear somebody say like all the eldest daughters stand up and raise your hand because we have some figuring out to do. These were all protections. Sometimes little girls learn that their needs weren't important. They weren't really validated for expressing themselves, or when they tried to speak up, they were dismissed or told somehow, either directly or just through body language and reactions, that it just wasn't that important. Now, another learned behavior that I see so often impacts women is this correlation that they learn between vulnerability and negative consequences. That's right. A lot of women learned that vulnerability came with consequences and not the positive outcomes that they would have wanted. So as a result, they adapted. They said, I'm never going to put myself in that position where I'm being vulnerable and showing my needs and just being dismissed or rejected. Now, people don't say this directly, right? We usually don't say these things outright, but there's something in us that shifts, and unconsciously, we start to take note and we do the things that we think are going to lead to more control and more protection and less of a sense of feeling rejected, abandoned, or too vulnerable. So our personality becomes that we're self-reliant, we're strong, we're capable, we're resilient. Okay, does that cue in the strong Black woman trope that we keep talking about? And we tell ourselves that this is just our personality. And here's the thing, so many of these traits have helped so many women to succeed professionally, but these same traits can create challenges in our intimate relationships. That's right, ladies. I'm going to keep it real. And Habeeb said this in our discussion last week in so many words. Men do not want a boss chick at home. Men do not want a healthy man, a healthy masculine man doesn't want to be in a position where they feel like their woman can't be vulnerable around them, or where they feel like they can't provide a sense of safety or protection for their woman because she's just so hardened and portraying this persona that she doesn't need anybody. And there's this delicate dance between the male ego and the female ego. And I always say women want to be desired and taken care of. Men want to be needed and respected. Agree or disagree, but this tends to be that complementary dance between masculine and feminine energy. All right. So when you're the boss babe in your relationship, it's not that strength is bad or that a man doesn't like a strong woman, but in the relationship, it can cause disruption or things to be on a rocky, shaky ground because protection and connection often pull us in different directions. The things that we're doing to protect ourselves make it harder for us to connect ourselves. All right, so the third thing I want to talk about is the fact that healing and performance are two completely different things. So, this is where I think a lot of women really get stuck after they have a lot of awareness. They might hear conversations about feminine energy and they might start performing femininity. And I always say you can put lipstick on a pig, but that doesn't change that it's a pig. So, until you change that core of you that's not really able to be in a feminine mode, you can perform femininity, but it's not going to be the same. So some women might try to soften their voice, but don't let you irritate them, and then they quickly revert back. They might try to receive more, but they're still in a place of needing to control. They might try to let him lead, but they're second guessing him. And those signs, outward signs of performing femininity, they're not bad in themselves, but they are also not substitutes for healing. Because here's the thing, we go back to the nervous system. If your nervous system doesn't feel safe, you're eventually going to return back to those behaviors that you were using to protect yourself because it becomes very instinctual. Like, I need to feel safe, so I'm going to do the things that I have always done to feel safe. And the bottom line is no amount of performance of a thing is going to lead to the inner peace, which is an internal state. So you can't perform your way into peace or trust or into a secure attachment. The healing is what has to come first. And when the healing happens, many of those behaviors that are not helping you in your relationship, they just begin to fall by the wayside naturally because you have true healing underneath all of it. All right, so we understand that performance is not the same as healing. I want to wrap up with this. The real question that I want us to think about is not how can I become more feminine? It's what am I protecting myself from that's keeping me in my masculine energy? I want you to think about what are you protecting yourself from? Instead of asking yourself, why can't I let him lead? You might want to ask, what feels unsafe about releasing control? Instead of really banging your head against the wall and asking, why do I keep attracting unavailable people? I want you to ask yourself, what feels familiar about these unavailable relationships or partners? Those are the things that are going to lead you to the core issue and the deeper areas of healing that are going to actually end up setting you free. So those are the questions, and then what you do with the answers afterwards that are going to actually create transformation. So I want you to understand that healing does not mean becoming perfect. No, we're not doing the perfect thing. That is what actually leads so many women to being so tightly like high strung and tightly wound up and unable to relax. So it's not about being perfect. It doesn't mean you'll never be triggered. That's how you grow in a relationship, is allowing yourself to feel the trigger and deal with it. It also doesn't mean you're never going to make a mistake. Look, I've been married for 15 years. You think sometimes I don't have to like pause and say, okay, all right, you didn't want to do that. All right, got to repair. It's time to go back. You got to apologize. But what healing does mean is that you're going to become more aware of those wounds, of those stories, and those fears that are driving your behaviors or that had been driving your behaviors, so that then you can learn how you can respond instead of just automatically reacting to those stories. It also means recognizing when your past is speaking louder and dominating the conversation more than your present or even the future self that you envision for yourself. It also means choosing differently over and over again. Like, I've been working out regularly 3 times a week, really hardly ever missing for more than a year. But it was day by day by day. It was coming up on a Monday and saying, you know what? It's on my calendar. I'm going to do it. It was choosing again and again and again to do it. But you just have to take it step by step, little by little, one step or one action or decision at a time. And you keep doing that until those new choices become your new normal. Okay, let's get into some Q&A. You guys know I love answering your questions. Question number 1 is, why do I keep repeating the same relationship patterns even though I know better? And like I said earlier, knowledge can change your mind and you can agree that you need to change, but it's the healing, it's the choosing over and over again. It's the falling down and picking yourself back up to make a healthier decision. That's what solidifies the actual transformation. So sometimes you grew up not knowing what healthy relationships look like, and you're just repeating what you saw. So once you have that awareness, when you're triggered, when you feel rejected or disappointed or afraid, it's important to recognize the ways that you revert back to those unhealthy coping mechanisms. And then it's doing the opposite or the thing that you've learned is healthier. And this is where getting help can be so important. I've worked with so many women in my coaching programs as well as in my therapy practice where there's a point where they have to make that decision to respond and not react. And it gets so, they even say, this is so hard. Dr. Nicole, I don't know if I can do it. It's so hard. It is so, so hard. I hear that phrase over and over. And I always say, that means you're on the right track. If it were easy, then you wouldn't have an issue and you could just snap your finger and change like that. But because it's hard, it means you're on the cusp of that transformation. Okay, question number 2 is, can I be a strong, independent woman and still be in my feminine energy? Yes, you absolutely can. There is nothing that says being strong and being feminine don't go together. The problem is not the strength, it's where strength becomes your armor and your protection and the only piece of clothing, so to speak, that you have in your wardrobe. So many women confuse feminine energy with weakness and masculinity with strength. And so they end up valuing the masculine side of themselves and devaluing the feminine side of themselves. I don't believe in that black or white dichotomy. I ask women to ask themselves, can you be strong and still receive? Can you be accomplished and still be vulnerable in your intimate relationships in a way that allows you to connect? Can you be capable and still allow yourself to ask for and receive support? Those are the key questions, and that's where the real work begins. And the last question is, why is it so hard for me to let go of control? Yes, so many women are dealing with how to loosen the grip of control. And I always remind women that if you are wounded, if you are unhealed, control often feels safer than trust. So you automatically do the thing that feels safe. So for many women, control was their response to those things we described: the disappointment, the betrayal, the inconsistency, or simply having to carry too much responsibility. Sometimes we see this play out as a woman will get older, she almost regresses to being immature, or she just holds on to control and she's like the matriarch of control, and it's just not working for her relationships. So it's not that control itself is the problem. It's really, what are you using control to protect you from? What are you afraid of? What are you fearing is going to happen if you try to stop controlling everything? What is it that's going to allow you to take the risk to be more vulnerable and to open up and to connect? And once you get, that's the area, like once you get into that arena, that's where the actual healing begins. All right. Thank you all for sending those questions. And don't forget, you can always send a question to my DMs on Instagram. You can email me and it'll be anonymous, and I will just answer your questions in the episode that it relates to. So, if there is one thing that I want you to walk away or take away from this episode, is that you don't need to become a different woman completely to experience healthy love. You might simply need to heal the parts of yourself that learned that healthy love was not safe. And that's that part of you that's gravitating to all the talking points, the gender wars, the influencers who oftentimes don't have your best interests at heart. I also want you to understand that the goal is not perfection. We're not saying you have to be this nice, neat, perfect package before you can put yourself out there. The goal is for you to be free, emotionally free, free to receive, free to trust, and free to connect in a way that feels healthy and fulfilling to you. And this is usually actually the authentic version of yourself in relationships. And thank you all so much for joining me this week for this kickoff with the 100th episode last week and the kickoff to season 4, where we are going to dig into all aspects of improving relationships and inviting and experiencing healthy love. If anything about this conversation resonated with you, please share it with another woman who you know needs to hear it. And of course, subscribe, hit the like button, turn on your notifications. And if you are on any of the podcast platforms, leaving us a review helps so much. And again, if you are ready to move beyond just awareness and begin creating real change in your life and relationships, I invite you to explore the Boundaries to Bliss community. I want you to know that you do not have to figure this out all alone. As we said, the awareness is powerful, but the transformation happens when you have support, community, and accountability, and a safe place where you can practice these new ways of showing up. This is exactly why I created the Boundaries to Bliss Society. And it is a community for women just like you who are ready to move beyond simply understanding boundaries, understanding feminine energy in relationships and self-care, and to actually start living them. Inside, we have conversations just like this and on an even deeper level like this every month. We support one another, we learn together, and most importantly, we do the inner work necessary to create these healthier relationships and a peaceful life. And we have a lot of fun while doing it as well. If you're tired of just consuming content and you're ready to actually create real change, I invite you to join us. You can learn more about the Boundaries to Bliss Society at the link in the show notes. I would absolutely love to welcome you into this community. Until next time, stay soft, stay open, and continue healing. I'm Dr. Nicole.